Welcome to Archives. This is episode 1 of the new kind of reimagined format of Archives. You're probably most familiar with this already just being here on YouTube, or if you're just listening to this, maybe you're listening to it on iTunes or Spotify. Regardless of how you're consuming this podcast, I hope you guys really enjoy it. I'm excited for this kind of new chapter. Normally what I would do for Archives, I guess we'll kind of go back just to get everybody up to speed. Originally, this show started on my YouTube channel where I would basically just take in questions. No, that's not how I started. That's what the show became. Originally, the show started as me flipping through negatives and prints from my archives, and just kind of looking at old work that I hadn't looked at in a while, telling stories, and it was just a lot of fun. Eventually, the show turned into cutting and sleeving negatives, basically catching up on my backlog because it got way out of hand, and I would answer questions that you guys sent in, and I really liked the show that way because it was much more conversational, where I could basically have a better conversation with you guys, taking in your questions every week, talking about specific things that you guys really wanted to hear, and I really enjoyed that format, so I decided to kind of lean into that with a new podcast. So the show is still called Archives. I'm not actually going to be archiving my film as I do this anymore. I know some people might not like that because they said they liked sort of the fly on the wall kind of feel to it as I was sitting here working, but I wanted to make sure the audio quality was really good because I know some people are only going to be consuming this whether they're driving to work or riding the transit to work or however it is you're going to be listening to this. I want to make sure the audio quality is really good, so as I move the mic closer to me, that's also moving it much closer to the scissors and the sleeves, and it's very, very noisy. I tried it and it's not good. So we're going to be sticking to the name Archives though, just because it's kind of become its own thing that's synonymous with my YouTube channel. So the show is still called Archives, but we're basically going to be taking in questions from you guys every week. I will also just kind of be talking about anything that's maybe on my mind that week in the world of photography and kind of keeping you guys up to date. And it should just be a laid-back, fun kind of thing. I'm hoping this is something you guys can just kind of enjoy and listen to while you're doing other things. I like to listen to podcasts when I mow or when I'm driving or editing, anything like that. So I hope you guys really enjoy this. But let's go ahead and take some questions in. I posted the other day on Instagram asking you guys, for questions for the show. Got a lot of really good ones here, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I am not going to be cutting these or anything in terms of the editing. This is just all one take, so if I fumble over my words, bear with me here. Josh Clements Photos, he says, how do you know what you want to be shot with digital versus what you want to be shot with film? There's so many times I go out and I take photos with my mirrorless, and then I wish I had taken those photos on film instead, and vice versa. I think anybody that is I guess you can call it a hybrid shooter, someone who shoots both film and digital, I think this is something that everybody struggles with. I did for a really, really long time. Now I've kind of let go of that, and it doesn't really bother me as much, or I'm just not as concerned by it, where it used to really bug me if I got a photo that I really liked that I shot on digital. I would get really bummed, and I'd be like, man, I wish I had this on film, because. And I'm not really sure if it was sort of it wasn't necessarily for the sake of like, I want to make sure I have a physical copy so that it never goes away, because, that's not really it for me. And it wasn't necessarily about the look either. I don't know if it was just sort of me like, oh, I want to make sure I can prove like this was shot on film. Like I didn't see the photo right away. You know what I mean? I don't know if it was like a badge of honor type thing that I think a lot of people have with film photography. Even shooting it as long as I have, like starting with film, I learned on film, but it was still just sort of like a thing that I would really want to be able to do with any photo that I had. I wanted to make sure it was shot on film. Like that made it more special or important. And as I've gotten older and just more and more years, I've just kind of realized like that's not as important to me as it used to be. Now, for instance, I have kind of slimmed things down to just my M6 and an M10P, which I just got, and I have an SL2 that I'm using for, filming these videos and more of like my kind of high-end like professional work. But for like everyday life, my M6 is what I've used for years, and now the M10P is like a perfect pair to that. And I've carried both with me, and sometimes I'll just grab the M6 because I just feel like grabbing the M6, and other times I'll use the M10P. It really just comes down to what I feel that day. Like, what do I feel like shooting? If I just want to throw a camera over my shoulder and I don't want to have to stuff rolls of film in my pockets, I'm not going out specifically to shoot. Sometimes I'd throw an extra roll in my pocket or something. But depending on like where I'm going, what the conditions are like, that can kind of dictate it. If I'm going somewhere where it's going to be really, really dark, the M6 is probably not the best idea because I like pushing my HP5 film, but you can only push it so far. Now I know there's going to be somebody listening to this that is going to say, well, I've pushed it to 12,800, and I get that, but the convenience of being able to just throw my ISO up really quick when I need to, it's great. And for me, that's kind of when it comes down to like for personal work and everyday life kind of stuff, I would rather have the photo rather than not. So there would be instances where if I only had my M6 and a 35 f2 lens on there, sometimes that's not the best combination to get a certain shot, whether it be the lighting condition or whatever it may be. If I can make that photo, or at least just if I can use a tool that's going to help me get a photo that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to get, whether it be low light or whatever, then I'll take the photo. I don't think it needs to be a one or the other kind of thing where I'm all digital or I'm all film. I am very happy shooting a mixture of both now, and I honestly didn't think I would ever get to that point. But it really just kind of comes down to the day. And as I get older, I feel like I'm just so much more concerned about having the photo itself versus what I used to make it, whether it be film or digital. Using the tool that you want to use is important. That's a whole other topic. But again, it's just going to come down to the day, I think, for me. JC Long Photos says, do you ever miss the process of home development and darkroom printing? Absolutely. Now that I'm shooting, I guess, more digital for personal work than I used to, I obviously, as a result of that, my amount of film that I'm developing is going to drop. That's just, it has to work that way. So part of me wonders if maybe, I would want to get back into developing at home, but at the same time, just with my schedule, it's just such a slower process with everything I have going. For years, I developed all my own film. I scanned everything myself. I printed it myself at my home in my darkroom. But life changes. It's interesting when people go back on some of my older YouTube videos and they see me in my darkroom and they're like, why don't you have that anymore? And I'm like, well, when I made that video, I had just gotten married. I didn't have any kids. My life was much kind of slower paced and just less busy than it is now. So I obviously miss it, but life changes, and I'm just in a different season of life than I was back then. So I definitely miss it. At some point, I'm sure I'll be developing and scanning my stuff again because I know how I am. Seasons change and priorities change, and right now this is what works for me, to be able to send my film to the darkroom lab. They can process and scan everything there. I download my film scans, they send my negatives back, and it works. I can spend more time actually shooting photos rather than doing all of that kind of work. So just something for me that I kind of keep in mind is the trade-off there with time more than anything. But I absolutely miss the process of it. I used to love going in my dark room and developing the film. I'd throw on Bob's Burgers or The Office, Parks and Rec, and I would just sit there and develop for hours and get caught up on all my film, and it was really enjoyable. Anybody who develops film, I think, can relate to that. Printing in the darkroom is something I miss all of the time. And that was sort of like a Sunday ritual for me for a really long time. Every Sunday I'd go in there and just carve out, several hours specifically just to get in the darkroom and print. Listening to bands like Explosions in the Sky or This Will Destroy You, God is an Astronaut, like all of those kind of bands, listening to that while I'm in the darkroom printing was just like the most relaxing, enjoyable thing for me. So yeah, I really, really miss that. Maybe one day when my kids are older and life slows down, I'll get back to it. But again, right now, just not feasible. But yeah, I absolutely miss it. Let's see what else we got here. The Best of You 415 says, if you can sit down and talk to any photographer in history about their process, who would it be and why? This is really, really tough because my like gut reaction would be Elliot Erwitt, but at the same time, just because he's like an icon to me, I don't know how well I would be talking to him and asking questions to Elliot Erwitt. I would probably get very starstruck. I would lose my train of thought and just, I don't know how well I would do. And the fear of that, like, prevents me from wanting to do it. I just think, I'd rather listen to somebody else talk to him so I can just hear from him rather than like me try and talk to him, because I feel like I would just get starstruck. But at the same time, like, it would be really, really cool to, I don't know, ask him questions that maybe I haven't heard in other interviews. Just his sense of humor there. And he's talked about that before, saying like, he didn't really set out to make funny pictures, but people tell him his pictures are funny. And they really are. And that's something that I really appreciate, because it's the kind of stuff that I look for in like everyday moments with my own family and my friends, and just random things that I happen to see as I'm walking around with my camera. So I don't know, maybe I'm kind of torn on that. Elliot Erwitt, I would love to talk to. I would just need to, I don't know, medicate of some kind beforehand, I think. Scott Symes says, have you made photo books of family photos just to have around the house? And if so, what is your process? My youngest is 19, and I'm just going to start going back through the archives. It's daunting. Yeah, I can only imagine after, my kids are 5 and 3, and the photos I have from that time frame is pretty insane. So I can't imagine if your youngest is 19. I do have photo books of just family photos around the house from like different trips, the birth of our kids, that kind of stuff. I normally use any kind of just random service, Artifact Uprising, Adorama Pics, any of those kind of places I've used. And they're great. They're great quality for sure. I think Adorama Pics is like, they've like rebranded their like photo book kind of service, but it is really nice quality. For me, like the process, I kind of approach it just the same way. Well, I guess it's kind of different. For instance, with the kids' books, when they were born, it's chronological, so it starts, to kind of tell the whole story from the moment we get to the hospital and as we're leaving and everything in between. Whereas like the other kind of trip photos, I would just kind of pair images that worked well together, same way I would if I were making a zine or a photo book that I was going to sell. I'm actually in the process of making I guess, kind of quarantine book. Photos all made in the backyard during the early kind of stage of the pandemic. I made some of my favorite photos I've ever made of my family in that time frame, and we were just spending every second together in the backyard. And it was springtime, it was good weather, we would just sit around the fire, and it was just awesome. Like we got so much just closer as a family, and we already are a really close family. Like we spend all of our time together, we're home a lot, but there was just something really, obviously, as crazy as that time was, and our daughter being autistic, she wasn't going to school anymore. She's in preschool. She wasn't going to school anymore. She wasn't getting the same therapy 3 days a week that she would get from therapy throughout the normal year. And it was definitely an adjustment, but we just spent so much time together. And our kids, Elliot and Nora, they both spent so much time together that he really brought out a different side in her and vice versa. Like they really grew a lot together and got really close. And I made a lot of photos of the two of them together that they were photos that I never knew if I would be able to make, just because, with Nora, it's not a normal brother and sister kind of dynamic, and that's okay. Like, it's interesting to kind of watch that and look for photos and look for moments in something that you don't normally see or that you don't normally expect, and so much of it is unknown. And it was really, really cool to kind of watch that and photograph that. And so I made a lot of photos that I was really happy with, and I want to put together a book just to kind of commemorate that specific time. And actually, this is another thing that people have actually brought up. We share a lot of photos on social media of just everyday life. And I think that's what a lot of people enjoy seeing from me. It's not the only thing I shoot, but it's obviously a big part of it. Like, I enjoy everyday life from, seeing my own everyday life moments, but I enjoy following other people and seeing their everyday life moments. Sharing the work on social media is definitely different than consuming it in a book. People have asked if I would ever do, a book kind of selling my family photos, like in a collection or anything like that. People like Sally Mann and many other photographers, but she's obviously like at the top of the list of who people are most familiar with their personal family life being their work. We share it on social media. I don't have any plans of making a book of these to like release to the public. There's just something different and more intimate about having a book of the images, in printed form in other people's houses that, I don't know, it feels different. And I feel like that to me is just saved for us. I don't know. Molly, my wife, we kind of talk about this kind of thing regularly, and just make sure we're keeping just an eye and keeping attention on that kind of thing, and having those conversations like, does this feel okay to post? Is this too much? We've talked about the whole, publishing the book, and we're like, that just doesn't feel right, so we're just not going to do it. That's just kind of what we go off of, I think a lot of people assume that because we share a lot of everyday life moments that we're sharing all of the photos, but there are way more photos that I take of the family that don't see the light of day than the ones that do. Just because there's something different about releasing a photo, sharing it with the world on social media. Obviously, we're conscious of what we share and whether there's a line, if this photo is too much or anything like that. Anything that we just aren't 100% sure of, we just don't post it, and that's okay. But yeah, it's just one of those things that you kind of have to keep in check and regularly ask yourself that question. So I do plan on making, plenty more books of my everyday life and, with my kids and stuff, but they're not all going to be, to the public, obviously, like I do on social media. Let's see. David Burke says, what's more satisfying to you, the click moment or the end result? Like when you take the photo, is that more exciting, or when you see it as a finished photo? That's really tough, and that's a really good question too. There's a certain level of excitement when you're there seeing something that makes you pull your camera up to your eye. Man, especially with film, like not being able to see it right away, there's such a anticipation, and it's like you're waiting and waiting and waiting until you finally see the photo. And then when you do see it, and if you nail it, that's like the best feeling ever. I don't know if it's the best feeling ever, though. That's really, really tough. I don't know, I really enjoy that aspect of it, but at the same time, like, it's really nice to be able to just see something that excites you enough that you want to take a photo of it, and whether you get the photo or not, the fact that it excited you that much to make a photo in the first place, that to me says a lot. I would probably have to go for that moment, the click moment, when you're actually there seeing it with your own eyes. There's something really special about that, and that's another thing that we can kind of talk about because it kind of relates to that. A lot of people have asked, does it take you out of the moment when you're shooting? And For me, it doesn't. I feel like I'm much more engaged when I have a camera in my hand and I'm looking and seeing everything. It's like I'm hypersensitive to all of the different things going on. So yeah, actually, I'm doing a video kind of specifically about that, so I don't want to get too far into it, but it's something I feel really like strongly about, just because it's something I do every day, and I get that question pretty often. So yeah, the click moment for me is probably more exciting than actually seeing the finished photo. But yeah, more on that later. Let's see here. Man, there were a lot of questions here. Try and flip through some and see, what the highest liked photo or comments were. Let's see. Stranded on a desert island. This is from Virginia native. Oh, and actually, I don't know if I mentioned it. The last question was from David Burke. Maybe I mentioned it already. I don't know. Virginia native. Stranded on a desert island. Can only take one photo book. What would it be? I would include a camera, but I feel like that's obvious. Yeah, if I got my M6, I'm good. One photo book? That's a really good question. Man, desert island photo book. I'm like looking, for those listening, I'm looking at my shelf. I don't know. I would have to say Elliot Erwitt, because he's like one of the people that I can just always look through and enjoy, no matter what I'm looking for or what subject matter it is. Yeah, for the sake of not taking all day, because that is a tough question, I would say Elliot Erwitt, personal best. We're going to have to go with that, because I could spend all day and go back and forth on that. Let's see. Okay, this is good. CTGDLY. Not sure how to pronounce that. They say, what are the most important questions to ask yourself before making a photograph? This could go a number of different ways in terms of how to read that question. You could look at it morally, like, is it right to take this photo? Especially if, I think that's something that like a lot of street photographers would probably have to ask themselves. I personally don't do street photography in the way of like what it looks like today. I like walking around my downtown Chillicothe, Ohio, and walking around looking for interesting photos, but I'm not looking to specifically go out and photograph strangers. One of the biggest things that I think I would struggle with if I were a street photographer is if they see me taking a photo of them, maybe they don't say anything. Maybe they don't like cause a scene or ask me, hey, why'd you take my photo? But maybe they are on their way to work, and then the rest of their way to work, they're thinking, what was that photo for? Why did they do that? What does something look weird about me? What's going on? All of those kind of things that maybe would be bugging that person internally all day. I would be thinking, oh my God, I hope I didn't make that person feel uncomfortable. I hope, you know what I mean? Like I struggle with making sure I don't upset or not necessarily offend, but more just upset, like in a harmful way or anything like that. That for me would be something I would struggle with. And I'm sure a lot of street photographers don't look at it that way, and they don't think that they would walk away, after getting their photo taken and thinking about that kind of stuff. I don't know. I don't know what goes through other street photographers' minds, and there's nothing wrong with it. That's just kind of how I feel about it. Like, I don't know exactly how well I would be able to handle that. So you could look at it morally, like I said. For me, when it comes to like everyday life kind of stuff, I'm shooting a lot, and I don't ask myself a ton of questions beforehand. Obviously, I'm asking like technical questions to myself, like making sure, okay, is this the best angle? Should I move a little bit over? How am I layering things? Is the exposure right? Like those kind of things I'm obviously running through sort of like a mental checklist as I'm shooting. But at the same time, it's kind of nice to let go of that a little bit. I've been taking photos of the kids with a flash on my camera and just boosting the flash up so there's a lot of light, and I'll stop the lens down, and I won't even have my camera or have my eye through the viewfinder. I'll just zone focus and just kind of get the camera in the right range and hold it down at my hip and at their level, and just shooting more instinctually rather than, really kind of dialed in and technical. And there's just something freeing about that. I don't think I could shoot everything that way, obviously, but it's nice to be able to let go of that sometimes. So I do run through those kind of questions. But if it comes down to like, do I ask myself, is this worth it? I never ask myself that, because if I even thought this is worth possibly taking a photo, I'm going to go ahead and take the photo anyway. And maybe it's trash and I don't actually see anything after I look at it, but if it's enough to make me think of the photo, then I think it's enough to take it. Let's see. Let's find some other ones here. Cam Stouter. Although a single photo can tell a story itself, do you feel like social media apps like Instagram have led to a decline in intentional storytelling through photos? Being such a fan of photo books, I'd imagine you have some thoughts on this. Yeah, I definitely do. I think that's something that a lot of people, Instagram and social media, a lot of people kind of give it a bad rep because they just think like, oh, it's just trash. People are just hungry for likes and that's it. And to an extent, for sure, there is a lot of stuff you have to like sift through in order to find the really good images and the really good storytelling. But they're there. There's definitely a lot of great storytellers on Instagram, and I have personally found photographers that I love their work specifically through Instagram. And I mean, I follow other like book publishers, and I see what they're sharing and, posting about new books that they have in. So you can't group it in and just say there's nothing good there, because there absolutely is. You just have to sift through a lot of it. I do think that probably the volume of the photos has made it a lot harder to find the really great storytellers and really powerful work on an app, because a cliche sunset photo is going to do just as good as anything else, and it's going to do probably a lot better than the really meaningful and I guess work that's going to age much better, and it's going to stand the test of time. But I think that's okay. Like, I don't think every image out there that is telling the best story needs to get the most likes, because at the end of the day, who gives a shit about, how many likes the photo gets? Like, I understand that followers and numbers and that kind of stuff can further someone's career, but I think anybody, regardless of the work that they're doing or the numbers they have, if they're doing good work, people are going to see it and people are going to notice. You just have to be diligent about pursuing it and sharing it and making sure it gets in front of the right people. I would be less concerned about, pleasing the masses versus really trying to deliver to the people who are actually going to appreciate that kind of work. I'm sure a lot of people don't care to see photos of my family in everyday life, and for that reason, they probably don't follow me, and that's okay. I'm not shooting for other people. I'm just trying to make photos that resonate with me. Let's see here. Vincent Perry Jr., really, really great dude, great YouTube channel as well, and photographer. He says, what has been your biggest challenge this year, and how have you worked towards resolving it? Where to begin with challenges in 2020? I kind of talked about it a little bit earlier with just the change of everything at the start of the year, and kind of how that threw our family for a loop with our daughter. My wife, she's an RN, so that's also been very just scary and nerve-wracking during a pandemic. Luckily, we have been able to, stay safe, and none of us have had COVID or anything, but yeah, it's crazy. Dealing with just the shift of everything and kind of dealing with changes on the fly and figuring out a new routine in everyday life, that's definitely been a challenge. For me as a photographer, I think with social distancing, the zine that I did, that really lit a fire under me to work on more personal projects and really try to publish more work and just kind of dial things in a little bit. I think a lot of that came down to the way I shot everything, shooting everything on a 35mm lens, black and white film, mostly my M6, also with an FM2. It just felt like me, and it kind of made me realize okay, this is this is definitely how I see most things, so I should probably try and lean into this. And, you know, I struggled after that thinking, this is really what I want to do. I want to focus more on just 35 millimeter black and white. But, you know, I'm the guy or one of the guys on YouTube that talks about film photography and different cameras and different film stocks. And it was a big, like, struggle for me to be able to let that go. Luckily, there are so many more people on YouTube now who do a great job at that, and I can let other people, Vincent included, you know, he's a great YouTube channel all about film photography, and it's like I kind of took a little bit of that kind of expectation off of myself, thinking like, well, this is just what I do, you know, and that's not what I set out to do with YouTube. I was just trying to like make videos that might be helpful for other people, but it just became my job over time. And it's like, that's not what I set out to do. That's not why I picked up a camera. That's not why I got into film. I got into film because digital wasn't where it is right now. So it just, I don't know. That was a big challenge for me. Like it was tough for me to be able to let that go. And even the idea of me shooting photos for a video with a digital camera feels strange, and it feels awkward, and as I'm doing it, I'm thinking, are people even going to care? But I had to like let go of that and just realize like I'm going to make photos with whatever I want to use and make the photos that I want to make, and it doesn't matter. Like if other people don't enjoy it and they unsubscribe or unfollow me, that's okay. It's I know it's my job, and my job should be to, you know, I'm making content for other people, but at the same time, I can't let go of like, this is my passion before it was ever my job. Like I need to make sure I'm fulfilled, not just, you know, the work stuff. So that was definitely something I struggled with a lot. And, you know, it's work related, but at the same time, this is pretty like simple stuff to be worrying about, especially considering everything else that's going on right now. So that made me rest easy a little bit, because I was like, you know, if this is really my biggest stress right now, then, you know, maybe I'm doing all right. I mean, obviously there are other like real life stresses. You know, my mom, her cancer came back earlier this year. That's been, you know, definitely something that we've been going through as an entire family together, but we've been spending a lot of time together and just making the most of it. And yeah, it's everyday life, just like everybody else's, but dealing with that kind of stuff for sure is it's taxing, and there's no like, I'm not a self-help guru. I can't tell people, you know, how to get through it or the best way to get through it, but I'm just finding my way through it like everybody else. So the change in, you know, what I shoot and how I shoot for my work, that was obviously a big thing, but compared to everything else going on in the world, it's really not that bad. I think that's going to be it for the questions today. For this first episode, I'm ready to wrap this up because I'm hoping you guys enjoyed this. I have no idea if you did. Please let me know, whether it be Instagram, Twitter, email, however you want to let me know. Let me know. My name's Matt Day. You can find me at Matt Day Photo. But that's it for today. Thank you guys so much for listening to Archives. I don't know how I want to wrap this up. This is the first episode, so I might need to dial things in over the next few episodes. I need to come up with like a new way to sign off. This is the end of episode 1. There you go.